dark place? Am I trapped in here? Is this real? I cannot remember. There was a manuscript, it held a key. A vicious cycle I must not surrender to.
No matter how many times the universe shows you the hint of light of positivity, if you always doubt yourself, you are going to stay in a dark place. Spoiler alert, when I first played this game of Alan Wake, the first one at least, I was immediately drawn to the story. Not so much the gameplay, especially the first game, which I will say is extremely unique, but the different layers to the story and the concept was really intriguing. It follows Alan Wake, a best-selling author suffering from writer's block, who retreats to a small town of Bright Falls with his wife Alice. And soon after their arrival, Alice mysteriously disappears, and Alan finds himself caught in a nightmarish situation where the town's residents are overtaken by a dark supernatural force. As Alan searches for his wife, he uncovers eerie connections to his own writing, with events from his unpublished manuscript coming to life. The story pretty much blends elements of thriller, mystery, and horror as Alan confronts the dark presence controlling the town while trying to understand his role in these twisted events.
Stephen King once wrote that nightmares exist outside of logic, and there's little fun to be had in explanations. They're antithetical to the poetry of fear. In a horror story, the victim keeps asking why, but there can be no explanation, and there shouldn't be one. The unanswered mystery is what stays with us the longest, and it's what we'll remember in the end.
So if you don't know, the first Alan Wake game actually ends in like a cliffhanger in a very dark way. Alan encounters Jaeger, which long story short is the villain of the story, and destroys her with the clicker. Realizing he must maintain balance in the story, Alan completes Departure by freeing Alice but strands himself in the dark place in the process. Finishing Departure, Alan writes the final line, "It's not a lake, it's the ocean," because pretty much this lake is where Alice got trapped into. So when he fell into it, he pretty much saw that it's not just a small lake, it's something way bigger. There's way more to it than he initially thought. And we actually come to realize and see it for ourselves in the second game. When I started Alan Wake 2, I was genuinely amazed at how great this game looked compared to the first one. Which really shouldn't be a surprise because the game pretty much came out almost a decade later. Alan Wake 2 has a monstrous story. Not necessarily in a bad way, it's just got a lot of layers. And to be honest, at some points it's a little hard to keep up with. But to sum it up as best I can, the game continues the story of Alan Wake, who has been trapped in a mysterious, otherworldly dimension called the Dark Place for years. Meanwhile, FBI agent Saga Anderson investigates a series of brutal murders in a small town called Bright Falls, where the killings seem to be linked to Alan Wake's missing writings. As the story unfolds, the lines between reality and fiction pretty much blur, with players controlling both Alan and Saga, each facing different threats, using the power of the light as a key gameplay mechanic against encroaching darkness. Alan Wake 2 deepens the psychological horror aspect while pretty much expanding on the original game's lore. And the gameplay in the second one was just unmatched. It was really so good and so unique. A lot of the stuff that I've seen in this game, I have never seen in any other video game, and that's really good to say compared to games that we have been getting nowadays. If you know, you know. And the two main character aspect was really interesting as well. I really liked it because if I ever got tired playing as one character, I would just switch to the other, because they were two very different dynamics in setting and in personality.
Are you okay?
No! It's my fault! It got out with my face! Scratch!
Sir, calm down. I'm gonna need you to take a breath.
He's changed the story. The dark presence. We must stop it before...
Easy now.
But what I really wanted to discuss about this game is the deeper meaning. This whole game had everyone thinking when it first came out, and I know I'm a little late to the party, I'm sorry, but it is what it is. But it has everyone thinking, what is the dark place, and how does Alan or anybody else who gets into it able to escape? So if you don't know, Alan Wake has been trying to get out of the dark place for years and years since he sacrificed himself in order to save his wife Alice. But he keeps ending up in the same place over and over and over. His writing becomes reality, so he tries to write his way out of the story, but his evil twin, Scratch, keeps rewriting the story to make it pretty much bad endings all across the board. And this is part of the reason why he keeps ending up in the same place over and over. A whole game later, we realize Scratch is really just himself, and he is pretty much stopping himself from escaping the dark place. In which I told you this story can be a little deep and confusing at times, but trust me, I'm trying my best to explain. Throughout the game, he says that he's in a loop that he just cannot escape. The game pretty much shows this in many ways, and that's why he writes Saga Anderson into the story to pretty much let her be the hero on the outside to help him out. But he eventually comes to realize that he's not in a loop, he's in a spiral. And for those of you who don't really understand what I'm saying, a loop has no ending, it's just continuous, while a spiral feels like a loop, but it has an ending point. And a lot of people say they think it's a way of them telling Alan that he will eventually reach an end when he's ready. Spiral is repetition, but with accumulated experiences, when the meaning does not change, but its form and expression changes over time. So each time Alan Wake wakes up, he has more knowledge to proceed. He just needs to find a way to make it end. So he did, but him and Saga had to make a sacrifice in order to make the story feel complete and resonate with the readers, or else it wouldn't work.
It found me writing. It tapped into me, influenced me. I was lost in my work. The link was severed when I finished Return, but the dark presence was hungry for more. And I was missing the small part of myself that it had been born from. Alice, love is strange. Even apart, we're still together in our memories. We put each other through hell to set us free. Again and again, different versions of us. Alice helped me get there, where I needed to be.
So he actually ends up sacrificing himself, and then the game ends. Now at first, I was actually really mad at this ending. I'm like, no way did I just do all of this just to have him die at the end. But then I found out there was a new game plus mode called the Final Draft, where you pretty much had to play the game all over again to get the true ending. And that's what I did, folks. And the second ending was way more satisfying. Alan was shot, but then he was resurrected.
Wake.
The ending worked. Scratch is gone. And so I return. With me, I bear the torch of knowledge.
And that got my wheels spinning. And at the end of me thinking, I just concluded that this game is a literal masterpiece. Because it makes sense. At the end of the game, Alan Wake didn't believe that he'd actually escaped the dark place. He still had his doubts. So, they brought him back into it. And us as the players had to continue the loop of the spiral, if that makes sense. As annoying as it is, I still thought this was genius. I mean, it makes sense, like we're going in another loop, we had to play it again. You might be thinking, you keep bringing up the dark place, but what actually is it? The by the book definition, if that makes sense, is a surreal and dreamlike dimension which undergoes constant shifts and modulations. Alan Wake describes it as conceptual and subjective, flowing rather than being solid. But in my opinion, the dark place is a mindset, something that you kind of put yourself in, which Alan Wake pretty much did. One of my favorite parts of the game is when they start singing Herald of Darkness.
From what I've gathered, you grew up nice and sheltered with mama's pretty stories and your own made-up fury. And mama gave me a magic clicker. Well, yes, I think it's true and fair to say.
At first, I'm just like, oh, this is kind of a catchy song that kind of explains the story, but when the game ended, I realized it had a lot more meaning behind it.
Show me the champion of light. I'll show you the herald of darkness.
The lyrics are, "Show me the champion of the light, I'll show you the herald of darkness." Now, I'm sure a lot of people had different thoughts as to what this could mean, and even just talking to friends, they had their own opinions of their own. But my interpretation of this song is that no matter how many times the universe shows you the light of positivity, if you always doubt yourself, you're going to stay in a dark place. One thing that you have to know about this game is that the final boss is Alan Wake himself. Sometimes the universe would give him an out, but he was keeping himself stuck in the dark place He was his own monster. And isn't that just the perfect lesson to us all? You have to face your fears, you have to face your doubts, or you will not progress. Sometimes you're your own worst enemy. And like I said, no matter how many times the universe shows you the light of positivity, if you doubt yourself, you are going to stay in a dark place.